Hey guys, you join me with Igor, who is a journalist who lives in the area in Petrovsky, I believe, and he's been documenting life here in Donetsk since at least 2014. So I'd like to sit down and have an interview and ask Igor about events. So, with the help of Masha, our translator, I'll ask Igor, please, could
В
you,
общем,
Igor,
Игорь, вы здесь
as a
живете
journalist,
давно.
describe
Как
life
журналист,
since the
расскажите, пожалуйста, о том,
2014
как вообще
events
жизнь
there
идет
here
здесь
in
с
Donetsk.
2014 года, если вкратце.
Okay,
Okay, from 2014, life has been changing constantly. From really horrifying events of 14 and 15, we came out to a quite a strange life between war and peace, when, in principle, every week somebody used to die, either from shellings or from shots of snipers or from the drones. But the life was more or less calmer. More military people started to die in comparison to the amount of civilians who died. So I wouldn't say that it was peace, but it was something somewhat closer to peace. But when it started to be clear that not Poroshenko but Zelensky becomes a president, it's not like we believed that there would be some changes, but there was some little hope that maybe something would change for the better. Like maybe we at least would be able not to shoot at each other. And Zelensky's campaign, what he announced, they gave this slight hope that it would happen. And people who voted for him, they of course wanted to move to some sort of more or less peaceful existence. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And the recent events before, like half a year before the military operation was started, maybe many of you heard about the events like Ukrainian snipers who were working from the gray zone and they shot at the outskirts of the town, like they would kill an old guy right in his yard, or that little child was bombed from the drone right in the yard of his home. Of course, it all added and added and added more to the situation, and also the rhetoric of Zelensky became more cruel. So in the end, подожди, в какого года? Yeah, so the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, the rhetoric of Zelensky changed even more. It became absolutely military. So it was about like Croatian scenario. So it was the prerogative of some marginals, of military marginals of Ukraine, and now they completely rejected Minsk negotiations. Like nothing in terms of peacemaking would stay in place, because it would be like, okay, we agree on some sort of ceasing of fire, on some sort of peaceful part of that, and 2 hours later everybody forgets about these agreements. That's how it went. Спасибо за то, что вы сейчас упомянули обещания Зеленского политические, потому что вот он слышал, что во время своей кампании Зеленский говорил о мире, прежде чем его выбрали. И с его истории он так понимает, что он очень дружелюбно относился, когда он был актером, он очень дружелюбно относился к России. То есть многие люди, насколько он понимает, за него голосовали, веря в его обещания мира с Россией и мира в отношении Донбасса. И особенно люди из Мариуполя, вот он видел эти отчеты, эти записи, что они говорят, что они чувствовали себя абсолютно преданными Зеленским. Well, there is nothing surprising about it. Yes, he was perceived as some sort of a pro-Russian, well, not pro-Russian, that would be a wrong way to say it. There is nothing like pro-Russian in Ukrainian among Ukrainian politicians. That's a myth. But he was perceived as some sort of a reasonable person, like he's a businessman who is ready to negotiate. Quoting Zelensky, one of his first interviews was, "I am ready to negotiate even with the devil as long as I negotiate peace."
Wow.
That's what he said.
Willing to negotiate with the devil.
Yes, as long as I'm negotiating peace, I would negotiate with anybody. That's what was meant. So he said that he was ready. That's what he declared, that he is ready to negotiate with anyone, come to an agreement with anyone. Another important thing is that he said, "I am ready to burn completely my political rating, but I want peace. Like, I don't want to be in the politics at all. I just want to have it done and then I leave." That's what he was saying. So, of course, when he came to power, and when there were some more or less peaceful statements, everybody had this slight hope whether it's going to work or not. Although people who are interested in politics, they know who during all these years promoted Zelensky and where these peace talks came from. And the thing is, he was to sell content to Russia, because during all these years he was selling movies, different shows, all that was sold to Russian media, to Russian television. You can go to Russian TV channels now and still find the show called Svaty. It's his show, it's like a series, and his channel, this is the channel that was produced by Zelensky.
Is this Servant of the People?
No, it's called Svaty, and I don't know what it... Что это значит, Сваты? Да. Okay, this word means the parents of the bride and the parents of the groom, so them together. So in-laws, it could be translated as in-laws. So it's clear that in this particular context, he was a person who was like a bridge between Russia and Ukraine. So they were creating some sort of a neutral and even a uniting content. And also you have to understand that there was this long project, which was basically his campaign, which was called Sluga Народа, the servant of people. That's what you mentioned. And when he was talking about what's going on in Ukraine, so people basically voted not for Zelensky himself, but for the character he was playing, this Goloborodka guy, right? That's what it was.
With the help of a certain oligarch.
С помощью некоторых олигархов это происходило, да? Well, it's not a secret that Zelensky, all his life, he has worked together with Kolomoisky, or around Kolomoisky. Yes. And yes, of course, those who understood it, they were not really expecting any surprises from Zelensky, that, like, he would bring peace, because the president is actually the consensus of elites rather than just a leader. So all these people were right. He, step by step, he went to the escalation of this conflict.
Do you see similarities between what you've just said?
Вот между тем, что вы сказали, тем, что вот президент, который является консенсусом элит, вы видите, может быть, что-то же подобное в западных лидерах некоторых стран? Что это тоже не сам лидер, а консенсус. Well, I think that this is a general rule for all presidents. The president is always a consensus of elites and never the will of people. After all, somebody sponsors the campaign, somebody invests money into the presidential campaign, and then later on you'll have to pay back for what was invested into you.
So I'd like to ask the audience here if they agree with that summation about
Сейчас хотелось бы
leaders
задать
and whether
вопрос
they
аудитории,
represent their
согласны ли
people,
они
or whether they represent
с
the
этим
consensus
утверждением.
of their sponsors and the elites. That's quite a fascinating insight.
Это на самом деле очень круто сформулировано сейчас вами.
So I'd also like to ask in the political
Еще вопрос
about the character
о характере Арестович. Кто этот такой человек, Арестович? Арестович is a very good actor. Again, please understand, Арестович now is a character. If you listen to him, he's like a champion of the world in all kinds of sports. He's totally unclear where he served. He's like John Rambo, someone with some dark past and something heroic there, or rather unclear what his experience is. But our people know him as Люся Карамелька. You probably have seen this video where he plays the woman in a female wig wearing a dress. Yes. No, it's okay. Actor is an actor. That's fine. I'm not against that. What I'm against is what he does now. Because now his role is played of like someone who distracts stuff to himself. So he says what the administration of the president must hear, but at the same time, this administration can always distance themselves from him. Like they would say, they would be the next wave of mobilization. It is said by Aristovich. So if the reaction is negative, they can always say, oh no, it's Aristovich's personal opinion, so they can distance. He's a testing, то есть он такой тестовый девайс. He's a testing device. It's a popular way to act among the politicians in Ukraine. For example, the leader of a fraction of the servant of the people, or some bright representative of the servant of the people, does something absolutely crazy, says something absolutely barbaric, horribilistic. It's announced throughout everywhere. Like they would say, we will never observe Minsk agreements. Of course, there is some reaction in response. And then they just say, okay, that's his private opinion. Look, it doesn't work like this. He's an official. But by doing such statements, making such statements, they were escalating the situation. It's a popular thing to do.
So deniability on the first front with Aristovich.
То есть с Арестовичем, то, что можно вот так от него дистанцироваться, это точно сработало. Он также видит его как менеджера соцсетей. И еще он хотел бы спросить, комментарий Арестовича по поводу сионизма на Украине. Это, он думает, 13 или 14 года видео было такое.
Saying that Ukraine would become the Zion of true Slavs, almost like this Bandera.
Что, ну, это практически как бандеровская философия, что Украина станет таким Зионом, да, где будут настоящие славяне жить. Такое вот место. Okay, here we have to explain some principal thing. People, when like Aristovich, you see, they say the words that mean nothing. They cost nothing. They're worthless. They would go from one group to the other all alone. They are like mercenaries. They are hired. Whoever pays them gets to order the rhetoric. Aristovich was in a pro-Russian camp, then he was in radical Ukrainian camp, now he is in the servant of the people. His rhetoric constantly changes and you shouldn't pay much attention to it. It is like there is this now quite important politician in Poroshenko's surrounding, Goncharenko, Alexei Goncharenko. Back in 2012, he was supporting that Russian should be the second state language on a legal level. So he was this pro-Russian patriot. We celebrate the Victory Day. We protect the rights of Russian-speaking population. Then Maidan happens, and he immediately switches to Maidan camp. And in Maidan, he runs around the House of the Union in Odessa and tells all the shit about the people who died there. So these words mean nothing. They are easily bought and sold. Но время и факты абсолютно показали, все, что вы говорите, это правда. Он хотел бы сейчас сказать об Арестовиче, что это, еще раз повтори, что это Багдад Боб.
Baghdad Bob was the
Baghdad
public
Bob
relations
это
officer for Iraq,
он в Ираке работал в
and where he claimed that Iraq was
офисе по
defeating the
общению с
infidel,
общественностью.
and behind him on camera American tanks drove past.
То
as
есть
they
за
rolled
ним проезжают
into the
американские
capital.
танки, а он говорит, что все, они покинули Багдад. Ну, такое.
So for me, Arestovich
Так
will
что
lie
вот для него Арестович будет врать,
right up until the facts are right upon his head. He will
даже
still
когда
lie.
прямо за ним будет происходить что-либо, что абсолютно доказывает его ложь.
Слушайте, ну, как бы он этого и не скрывает.
Well,
что
he
он-
doesn't hide it.
То есть
He doesn't
он,
hide it that he lies.
он, на самом деле, он сейчас заигрался до такой степени, что он откровенно говорит.
Right now
«А мне
he
вот в этот момент нужно было
sincerely
вам
says,
врать, я
at
вам
this point I
врал».
had to lie to you, so I lied to you.
Он постоянно проговаривает
He
о том, что
constantly
не было
lets it slip,
эвакуации
like there was no
Мариуполя.
evacuation
Почему?
from
Потому что
Mariupol.
эти люди
Why?
мешали бы
Because
перемещению
these
войск.
people would
А то,
be
что вы
on
этих
the
людей
way of the
погубили,
troops.
ну, погубили и погубили.
So the fact that these people died, well, okay, they died, whatever. He doesn't hide it that he lies. He knows exactly that he has the attention of a certain amount of Ukrainian people, of quite a substantial part of Ukrainian people, and he understands that he is like a leader of a cult. So he can laugh at them, he can at people. He says, I lied to you before, I lied to you here, maybe I will lie to you tomorrow. He's fine about it.
But it's necessary to achieve the greater good.
Но это
That's-
все необходимо, чтобы высшей цели достичь в итоге.
Ну, а он оправдывает этим.
Yeah, that's how he justifies it, yes.
So we've talked about some of the leadership of Ukraine,
Вот, мы сейчас поговорили о некоторых лидерах Украины,
lies,
о том, что это люди, которые лгут, которые не выполняют свои обязательства, обещания.
So let's talk about the impact of
Давайте
those lies,
поговорим о том, как эта
broken
ложь и эти
promises
невыполненные обещания
on the people
повлияли
of
на жизнь
Donbass.
людей Донбасса.
Знаете, как мне бы
Okay.
хотелось сказать, что
I would like to say that
закончился
the horrors, I would love to say that the horrors for the people of Donbass are over, but let's be honest,
Донбасс добивают.
they are killing it now.
Держимся уже, наверное, знаете, как
We are now on the fumes.
еще в июле,
Back in July, no, correction, in September,
коллега спрашивал,
a colleague asked me, how the hell do you hang in here?
если ты
And
оставишь
he said, if you stop absolutely anybody
при фронтовом районе,
somewhere close to the front line and ask him, how are you hanging in here? He will say, I'm not hanging in. I have no strength. My strength left me back in July, but I have to go on somehow.
нельзя просто лечь и умереть.
I cannot just lay down and die, so I have to somehow go on. And that's what is happening. In fact, what do we have here?
Очень много погибших среди
There are really a lot of people who died, civilians who died. There are really a lot of people who had to leave the area, and I'm afraid that not every one of them will come back when the war is over. First of all, we will lose quite a substantial part of the young people. There are really a lot of wounded people. Recently, in the recent months, I've been working on a documentary movie, and I go to many hospitals.
У нас безумное количество
We have crazy number of young people who are wounded. You can find here a young, beautiful girl who has no leg or no arm.
всё это
It's-
не в последнюю очередь, это вот последние тенденции.
This is the recent tendencies. Already after the beginning of the special operation, it's the butterflies, the petal mines. People step on them and they lose their limbs. There are really a lot of people who lose legs and arms, and they will remain crippled forever. We talk a lot about the dead, about those who died as a result of the shelling, but we seldom speak about the wounded. We just mention them as a number, but people must understand what it means if you are wounded because of the shelling. Like 155 arrives. What happens to you? The person looks like he was butchered. It is almost always an invalid, and it's a serious disability.
From what I've seen, many
Из
of
того,
the
что вот он
wounded
видел,
go
многие
on
раненые
after their first stage care in Donbass or Donetsk, they go
после
on to be
получения
treated
первой
in
помощи
Moscow.
на Донбассе, в Донецке, например, они дальше перевозятся на лечение в Россию, в Москву, например. Это то, что вот он видел. Yes, that happens.
Зачастую такое, но они смотрят на
Plus, they look at the doctors always look at the condition of the patient. For example, well, you have to understand what Donbass is. It is the industrial region where medicine was, especially emergency medicine, was always very well developed. We have one of the best fire burns center. We have great specialists here. If they understand that they cannot help here, they send the person to Russia.
So for specialist things like prosthetic limbs,
То есть, например, если дело касается протезов, например.
that will be in
Вот с
Russia.
протезами...
Look, with prosthetics, when he's not ready to talk about that particular part, because we do have the production here, but it's quite archaic at the moment. Yeah.
Well, as I understand,
As for the burns, they are really good. As for the prosthetics, they need, they need equipment to produce it, and it's not like it's very much possible here. So it is better for the prosthetics to move to, for example, Moscow, from the technical standpoint.
yeah, I understand. The other question I'd like to ask you is, what has been your opinion since the takeover of General Surovikin?
С тех пор, как Суровикин возглавил спецоперацию, как вы думаете, что-то поменялось? Какое у вас вообще о нем мнение? Okay, I don't want to be an expert in everything. I am not a military specialist. The people in military who I know, they speak about Surovikin with respect. In my opinion, they understand it better, they know it better. As for what has changed, like what I see, I think there is more order now. But, of course, there's always something to improve. So let's hope that the people from the army, from the military who I know, that they're right in their assessment.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you very much.
Это отличный ответ.
That was a good one. So, please, can you speak a bit about the people, the civilians?
Расскажите, пожалуйста,
of
еще
Donetsk
о людях, о
and
гражданской
their
жизни
feelings and morale of
в Донецке.
the operation.
Как вот их жизнь поменялась с начала спецоперации? Okay, in general, the civilian life in Donetsk was very different. There were areas that were closer to the line of the front. There was Gorlovka, who was constantly shelled. There's Yasinovataya, that's also been under the shelling quite a lot. But in general, the city center was the place of more or less safe, because Ukrainians would mostly shoot in the night, would mostly shoot from 882nd caliber, those ones. So it wouldn't be a very distant shot. They didn't want to, they didn't want to attract much of attention of ABSE, of the international observers. Right? So it would be not on a very long distance, and it wouldn't be something that is really big.
Yes, I've covered some of those reports from the
Да,
OSCE,
он, кстати, говорил об этом.
UN and things. Yes, I understand. Who have since withdrawn, I believe.
И эти обозреватели, они ушли. Да, yeah, they left. And as it turned out, some of them would actually be sharing information, let's put it this way, so they were not really independent or objective. As far as he knows, Azov received radios from them, from those observers. They were listening to negotiations. They had access to the cameras that were on the line, on the line of contact. And our specialists also found in the building of SBU in Mariupol, they received the confirmation that they were followed, the observers. So Ukrainian SBU was watching them, and probably they held a certain work among them to hire them, well, kind of. Coming back to the civilian life, with the beginning of the special operation, there is no need to, the need to hide disappeared. So from the very first days, they started to use the artillery to shell the residential areas. Then NATO equipment arrived. 777 and so-called, we call them, три топора, three, ну и как их назвать? 3 axes. That's how they're called among people. Yeah.
Axis of evil.
No, axe is like an axe that the guy in the woods uses to cut the trees. Those axes. Yeah.
естественно,
because it's 777. You see?
Ah, I understand. Yes, I hadn't heard of that before.
Well, now you did. Yeah.
и первое время они активно использовали
So at first they also actively used .u,
с поражающим элементом, то есть направленную против живой силы.
and that's the anti-personnel thing. We saw just a second. We saw the parts of them, you know, that they're filled with
Yes.
those
Fragmentation.
fragmentation bits. You know those things. I actually have them in my purse. Yeah. Я часть этих штучек взяла из Луганска, из .u.
Таким образом,
So,
в Донецке и в целом
in general, in the DPR and in Donetsk,
относительно безопасных мест.
there were no more relatively safe spaces.
То есть, если раньше, допустим,
So
люди
if
могли
earlier people could move from the area that was shelled into the center where it was relatively safe, then now
да, в общем-то,
there's nowhere, and actually not just now, but from the end of spring, it's pointless because there is nowhere that is safer.
I'm going to just repeat a message to Igor that
Он
I've
хотел бы
been
сейчас еще раз
repeating
повторить
to many people here in
и вам, и всем
Lugansk,
людям,
Donetsk,
и в Луганске, и в Донецке,
that there is a growing
что есть
number of
реально
people in
растущее
the West
количество людей на Западе,
who understand
которые
the truth
понимают правду теперь уже,
and they want to help.
и они очень хотят помочь.
How can the people in the West
Как вы
help
думаете, как могут
people
люди
like
с Запада
yourself
помочь
in
людям,
your
вам,
work
в вашей работе,
and life?
в жизни? Что они могут ли они что-то сделать?
ну, в первую очередь, они могут помочь
Well, first
нам
of all,
прорвать
they can
информационную
help us to
блокаду,
break through this informational blockage,
потому что вот
'cause
за 8 лет,
for 8 years,
вот с 14 года,
since
и
2014, now it's almost 9 years, we were in this situation of informational blockage. We could film things, we could put videos somewhere online, but it would never go behind the borders of the republic. There were enthusiasts who were looking for information and then they could find it, but in general, journalists could come to us, foreign journalists could come to us, they would film something, leave us, and say something absolutely different.
поэтому, да,
So, yes,
перво-наперво нам
first
бы
of all,
хотелось прорвать
we
информационную
would love to break through this informational blockage so we would at least be heard.
Во-вторых,
Then what?
наверное,
The second thing,
люди могли бы каким-то образом
maybe
давить на
somehow
своих
people could
политиков,
push their politicians
чтобы, я не знаю, понимаете,
to...
тут очень сложно. С
Well,
одной
again,
стороны,
it's
я
really
понимаю, что
complicated. I
сил
understand
одного
that
человека немного, да,
there
и
is not
даже
much that a
группы,
single person or even a group of
но
simple
прямо
people can
сейчас,
do.
прямо вот мы с вами
Like, but
разговариваем,
right
да,
now we are
а
talking,
где-то в этот момент,
and maybe at this
прекрасные,
time,
замечательные натовские ракеты
some-
«Хаймарс» убивают чьих-то детей.
someone's wonderful HIMARS rockets are killing someone's children at this very moment.
То есть мы бы хотели, чтобы
So we would
Украине не оказывали эту помощь.
ask not to support Ukraine like that.
Они ведь поддерживают
Because
Украину,
they are
они
not supporting
поддерживают режим
Ukraine,
Зеленского,
they are supporting Zelensky's regime.
который, в
It is
общем-то,
not Ukraine that they are supporting. It is
все
they are
эти
supporting
обстрелы
this
это
regime, and this
террористические
it is
акты,
terrorism.
исполненные
It
не
is
с помощью
terroristic
каких-то
actions that
государственных взрывных
are
устройств,
not done
а с
by
помощью
some
современной
homemade
артиллерии.
explosives. They are done by modern artillery,
Precision artillery.
причем очень высокоточный.
Да.
Yes.
So it is a conscious
То есть это
target,
сознательное
particularly
нацеливание
with HIMARS.
хаймарсами.
The Western media were claiming that all
В то время
HIMARS
как
targets
на Западе все говорят, что все цели хаймарсов это
pre-approved
чисто,
by
они
the
заранее Белым домом получают одобрение от Белого дома, заранее, все эти цели.
To me, that says the
Для него
White
это что
House
значит? Это означает, что
has
Белый
agreed
дом согласился,
to the purposeful targeting
что
of
на то, чтобы
civilians.
реально именно на гражданских были направлены эти хаймерсы.
Да,
That's
по
right,
сути, да, так и
that's right, that's true.
I just want people watching to let that sink in. There we go. Is there a message that you have for
Может
the
быть,
Western
вы
audience?
напрямую хотите сказать что-то западной аудитории?
Дорогая западная аудитория,
Dear Western audience,
я хочу, чтобы вы понимали,
I want you
что
to understand.
да, безусловно,
Yes,
возможно, мы тоже не ангелы,
maybe we are not
но
angels
мы
here,
не хотели этой
but
войны.
we never wanted this war to
Мы
happen,
ее не хотим и сейчас.
and we still do not want it.
Никакой радости
We
от
have
того,
no
что
joy
началась спецоперация,
of
мы
having
не испытываем.
this special operation here. in general, you see, it's the Zelensky's regime that is totally not independent, put us into a condition when we had to choose whether we allow ourselves to be killed back in March or the special military operations begins in February. And look, if in March they would start this, maybe someone in the world would nod their head and say, "Oh my God, what a loss! These people are killed for no reasons." But yes, all these people, all of us, would be killed by then. Just think about it.
I think that's excellent. Thank you very much, Igor. Let me shake your hand, if I may, and say thank you very much indeed.
Спасибо.
Спасибо.